Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on the program where we cover the most interesting live trials and legal stories in the news today. And we have quite the rundown for you, so let's get started right now. And there she is. A lot to talk about there right now. Joining me is forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, it's great to see you. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning. How are you, Jesse?
I'm good. Look, I want to talk to you all about the crime scene and the autopsy, but I just want to get your perspective right now on what you just saw. This is just a taste of Claudia Hoerig on the stand. First impression?
I worked around the dead and with a coroner in New Orleans and the medical examiner in Atlanta most of my career, Jesse. And I can tell you something about the dead. You can say anything you want to about them because they have no way to defend themselves.
That's the funny thing about this, right? A majority of her testimony is bashing Carl Hoerig and talking about his sex fetishes and what she tried to do to please him. It seems, I know she's fighting for her life here, but at the same point, it seems highly disrespectful. But I'm curious your perspective on that.
Well, I kind of found it interesting that she started out bashing him, and then she kind of backtracks and goes into her upbringing, where she at least intimates that she's used to being in this environment. So which is it? Is it the way you were brought up, or is it the fact that your perception of your husband is, as you're stating, because he has no way to defend himself now, does he?
He does not. And again, she is saying, she's giving reasonable doubt. She's trying to show what their relationship was like, that it was an abusive relationship, both emotionally and mentally, and that really the question is, was this murder or was this a killing done in the heat of the moment? And we're going to talk more about that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we clearly have a lot to talk about from when Claudia Hoerig took the stand yesterday. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Law&Crime, everybody. We're still talking about Claudia Hoerig on the stand from yesterday, and I'm keeping a careful eye on that courtroom feed because we may go live any second, and we believe that the start of the day will be the cross-examination of Claudia Hoerig. Now, if you haven't seen her take the stand yesterday, she was on for about 3 hours detailing everything from how she met Carl to her relationship with him, to their marriage, to what happened when she ultimately shot him. Now, the issue of her pregnancy became a big factor in this killing. Let's play where she talked about from yesterday about the pregnancy.
You guys got married? You got pregnant.
I got pregnant.
Okay, is that a surprise?
It was a surprise because I was married 10 years before and I never got pregnant. And I thought that I was already 40. I thought that it was too late for me to get pregnant. I was not going to. My first husband had problems, and I guess that's why I didn't get pregnant.
Okay.
But still.
Had you and Carl talked about having kids?
We did.
You didn't?
No, we didn't talk about the kid stuff. And he asked me how I felt about kids. I said, I don't mind if I never have children. I'm so used to. I don't know, I'm old now, I don't think about those things anymore. I don't think about becoming a mother because I think I'm too old for that. Sleep deprivation, he would make me run miles and then he would leave me out in the middle of the woods in Newton Falls, dark like 6 p.m. and then disappear. I would freak out and start running real fast because I was scared that he left me behind. So I started running. I was pregnant, and I guess that it wasn't good. It was early pregnancy. He would do that kind of, and he wanted me to get in real good shape. He made me do work out with weights, and he was like a personal trainer while I was pregnant. I guess all of this made me have the miscarriage.
Okay, so you had a miscarriage?
I did have a miscarriage, yes, in the middle of the night, and I woke him up and said, Carl, I'm feeling a lot of pain. I hadn't seen him having my period. And then I sat in the bed, and then I looked down, and there was blood. I said, there was blood here, there was blood. I didn't think of I didn't have experience with it. There's blood. It was the middle of the night. He said, okay, we'll go to the doctor in the morning. And we went to the doctor in the morning.
All right, that was Claudia Hoerig explaining some problems in her marriage to the victim, Carl Hoerig, what ultimately led to him her shooting him. Now, Joseph, you had an opportunity to review a little bit of the forensic pathologist's testimony from earlier in this case. She is claiming something that seems to contradict what the forensic pathologist said. She said she shot him and he fell down the stairs. The prosecution is saying, well, no, she shot him at the bottom of the stairs. She was almost following him, and that this was a premeditated, planned murder. I'm curious your perspective based upon reviewing the forensic pathologist testimony.
Jesse, the forensic pathologist went through and described 2 gunshot wounds. Remember, we talked about A and B here. A does not, it has nothing to do with sequence. But what we do know is that he identifies gunshot wound A as being in a very acute angle, essentially from back to front, and at a very sharp angle like this, pitched, headed upward toward the head. And then B kind of walks around the body and fires down again at a very acute angle. And what this demonstrates is that she was in a position of dominance, the shooter was in a position of dominance over the individual as they were firing into them. The injury labeled as B struck several areas in the body, struck bone, and eventually struck the lung. I think that he also had a subclavicular rupture as a result of the round passing through this major vessel that runs essentially beneath the collarbone, which is in hospitals, it's where they put what's referred to as a central line in if you're trying to push a tremendous amount of medication to help a patient, say, for instance, in the event of cardiac arrest and other things like this. So they were significant. She was in a position of dominance, or the shooter was at least. And so, there's no indication that he had taken a fall either.
Right.
Which is something that you would normally see.
So, yeah, we're trying to understand what happened 11 years ago based upon her testimony, the forensic pathologist report, and things, what matches up, what doesn't. But we're now trying to understand what led up to the shooting. So we talked about her pregnancy. Let's talk about the miscarriage now when Claudia Hoerig took the stand from yesterday.
Yes.
And what happened after the miscarriage?
Well, I became very depressed with that because I was already looking to baby's clothes, even though he didn't want it. But I was determined to keep it. I was looking to baby's clothes, and he caught me looking at that. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Carl, please, don't talk to me about that." Okay, so I kept I was tuning him out, and I just decided I was going to have that baby, and he decided I was not going to have that baby. So he was doing whatever he was doing to make me not have it, and I was doing whatever I need to do to have it, to keep it. So we were just going in opposite directions. There was a lot of friction between us at that time.
And then in February of 2006, you got pregnant a second time?
I did.
Was that also a surprise?
It was.
How did Carl react when you told him about this?
Oh man, he said, we already discussed that. You keep setting me up. You're going to have an abortion. I said, Carl, we already discussed that. Don't even bring it back. Don't bring it up to me. We're not discussing pregnancy in this house. We're not discussing it.
Okay.
That he had any sexual issue or fetish. Is that called fetish? Fetish. I cannot say that word. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I never noticed before we got married. What I know is that he was very nervous about his penis. He had a lump in the middle of his penis that he said some woman when he was deployed. He went to Germany. She sat on his penis. She broke it. He has this lump, and that turned into cancer. He was freaking out about having cancer, and he was freaking out about not performing. He asked me if I was going to leave him. I said, no, I know that a lot of men have sexual issues because they get nervous and they cannot perform. I didn't see anything wrong with that. I didn't see it coming. I didn't think anything of it.
As this went on and all of this went on, again, why didn't you leave?
Wow. Joseph, I cheated here. I kind of peeked over at you during the course of her testimony, and I looked, and you kind of flinched a little bit at some of what she was saying. I mean, normal reaction. What do you make of this?
Wow. First off, I want to go back to the pregnancies. I want to know, since she's had these miscarriages, was she admitted to a doctor's office or to a hospital for D&C to make sure that she was okay? I want to know if an OBGYN treated her. I want to hear from an OBGYN that treated her. I want to know who made the diagnosis of pregnancy in these particular cases. It sounds like she's married to, I don't know, to a horrible beast is the way she's portraying him in this, sitting at his feet, fetching him drinks. She has to dress in a particular way. Watching TV with him is not spending time. She's trying to, imply that she's essentially his foot servant and has to comply with everything that he says, all of his wishes. And it's such a horrible set of circumstances. He's gone, by her own admission, 2 to 3 times, 2 or 3 days at a time. Well, if it's that damn bad, you do have a car, don't you? Leave. I'm amazed by this testimony. The idea that, she's talking about the fractured penis. This guy was on military duty in Germany.
And by the way, I'm pretty sure when you woke up this morning, you didn't think that was a term that you were going to be saying on the air.
I didn't think it was utter out of my mouth.
Yeah. You know what, Joseph? I want to get more to this. I know we have to take a quick break, so just let's hold off. We have so much to talk about. She was on the stand for 3 hours yesterday. Yep. So hold that thought, Joseph. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, clearly again, we have so much to talk about. We'll be right back. All right, Joseph. Now, Claudia Hoerig really likes to talk, providing a lot of details for that jury. Your perspective on her overall demeanor, how she's behaving, what she's saying on the stand. I'm curious your thoughts.
Let's begin with her use of language. I'm no I'm no forensic expert in the area of linguistics. However, I find it really interesting. If the folks at home will go back, and this is back some time, she talked about the words orgy, fetish, and swinging all along here. And out of all the words that she is using along the way, she paused and stated, I don't know what this word is. I think it's called, and then insert one of those 3 words so that it has to be repeated back before the court. It kind of re-emphasizes this idea that he's some kind of ogre, some kind of monster that's controlling her within their home. The things that she's talking about relative to him, let's talk about him as a professional. This guy's not only a pilot for a major airlines, he's also a pilot in the United States Air Force Reserve. If he is having mental issues, if he is having control issues with coworkers, they would present with coworkers. These people are intensely graded and followed along the way. So not only is he being watched by the people at the airlines, he's also being watched by the people with the United States Air Force.
And listen, we're taking what she says with a grain of salt, as well as the jury is doing. As you said, there might need to have some corroborating testimony to back up her claims. Yeah. But let's take a quick break on our end, Joseph. When we come back, we clearly have so much more to talk about in the Hoerig trial. We'll be right back. Okay, let's break it down right now with Joseph Scott Morgan, forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University. Joseph, your thoughts on her describing her mental issues, her depression, her inclination to kill herself. What do you think?
Well, I would think that there would be, we live in a world of paperwork, don't we, Jesse? I would think that there would be a significant document trail that gives us some information. She had mentioned in rather precise detail just a few moments ago how she had taken 30 tablets of some unknown sleep medication, had hidden his keys after he'd done this, and stole away from the house in her own car. And she was conscious for 10 to 12 minutes, I think, and then ran into a ditch, and she was taken to the hospital. But yet she had told him she was going to do this prior to, that is, taking her life. I can tell you this. If she went to a hospital, they would evaluate her. They would more than likely do a standard panel for drugs in her system and give you some kind of indication as to what she had on board. After they have kind of quizzed her, if she's back in the world of the living relative to her conscious mind, and she's displaying any kind of suicidal ideation whatsoever, they're going to hold her for probably 36 to 72 hours. I want to know if this ever happened.
Yeah, you're saying don't take her word for it. Don't take her word for it. Have some sort of documentation, because everything she's saying, she's providing a lot of details, but can we believe it? And let's play a little bit more of her on the stand talking about what seems to be a very strange relationship, according to her. Take a look. Okay, so Joseph, if we believe what she's saying, that she's suffering from issues, her husband was suffering from issues, they're having all these problems together, how does this realistically play in, these kinds of mental health issues? How do these play in to the actual killing?
Well, you know, it seems to something that she had been thinking about probably for a time. The picture that's painted is that he, you know, he'd fallen down the staircase in some way and this sort of thing. But for me, it's a totally different kind of picture, because she's in a dominant position over him with a weapon when he is shot. I don't know if she very well may have followed him down that staircase, waited to get him in that entrapped space, and then fired down upon him. Remember what the pathologist said. These gunshot wounds were at a very acute angle. Acute means sharp, down, driven down. She's, you know, she's giving a lot of detail, but she seems to be going in circles, trying to paint herself to be the victim. Even when it comes to this gentleman's family, she just couldn't stem the tide. You know, she's trying everything she can do in order to get this man help. She certainly
is. She certainly is. And when we come back, I want to ask you about the actual gunshot wounds, 2 to the back of the neck, 1 to the back of the head. We'll talk about what that means. Let's take a break on our end, but when we come back, we are going to discuss more of Claudia Hoerig on the stand. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We have an update for you in the Harvey Weinstein saga, the disgraced movie mogul who will go on trial on May 7th, facing 5 felony counts, including rape and sexual assault related to 2 women. We have an update regarding his legal team. It is being reported that Jose Baez, Ron Sullivan, and Pam Mackey will be hired to replace Ben Brafman, who was taken off of his case. Now, Jose Baez and Ron Sullivan, fans here at Law&Crime will remember them because they infamously won the acquittal of New England Patriot Aaron Hernandez. Remember, we covered that case back in 2017, and when he was acquitted, Jose Baez and Ron Sullivan represented him. You also remember that Mr. Baez won an acquittal in 2011 for Casey Anthony. And Pam Mackey represented Los Angeles Lakers phenom Kobe Bryant when he was accused of raping a 19-year-old back in 2013. The charges were ultimately dropped in that case. But this is quite a development for Mr. Weinstein to have these 3 high-profile attorneys now represent representing him. We are always going to update you about what is happening with Mr. Weinstein. And again, we do expect that trial to begin on May 7th. 5 counts, a lot at stake, and we will always update you about this. Now, we're also talking right now about the Claudia Hoerig case. That's where our main focus is. We expect to be live in that courtroom. Might be a little delayed today because we believe Claudia Hoerig, the defendant, is ill and that she was supposed to be under cross-examination at the start of the day, but she's been taken to a hospital for further examination. Of course, we'll let you know if we have any update about that. But as we were talking about, we're playing you her testimony from yesterday when she took the stand. It was incredible to watch her there for 3 hours. We had a feeling she was going to testify because she's been very vocal throughout this whole legal saga, complaining everything about her jail conditions to her extradition. So when she took the stand, she had a lot to say. Let's play a little bit more of her testimony from yesterday. Wow. So she's describing creating an apparatus to kill herself. Joseph, pretty unbelievable that she's describing this in what seems to be his precise detail, where she's, saying, well, I clearly matched this up, I wanted it to match my temple, and this is how I was going to, operate this. Almost if it's nonchalantly describing how she was planning on using the gun to kill herself.
I have to say, I've in all of my years of working as a medical legal death investigator, and for those that don't know, coroners and medical examiners handle almost 2 to 1 more suicides than we do actual homicides. I have never heard of someone creating a suicide device for a pistol. Now, I've had people use medical devices and that sort of thing. This is, I don't know, I'm amazed by it. I could see someone trying to create something like this in order to facilitate a mock scene or perhaps a scene that would give an individual an inclination that it was something other than a homicide, if you get my meaning. This is wholly bizarre.
I'm listening to this. I'm thinking this is a contraption from Home Alone or Saw. I'm not really understanding this correctly. But tell you what, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to analyze more of the day of the shooting, and also let's analyze the wounds sustained by Claudia Hoerig. We'll be right back. A lot of details, a lot to talk about, and as we're telling you, we believe Claudia Hoerig this morning has been taken to the hospital. We believe the sheriff's office has told local media that she was complaining of heart issues. They're having her checked out, and we believe she's going to take the stand later on in today where she will be cross-examined by the state. But before we get there, Joseph, I want to talk about the gunshot wound sustained by Claudia Hoerig. 2 to the back of the neck, 1 to the back of the head. What does that tell you?
He was essentially taken by surprise, and that she was firing from a dominant position. These gunshot wounds that this fellow sustained, they passed through. One in particular passed through several vital areas, including his aorta, which is the major vessel that supplies our body with oxygenated blood coming off of the heart, and also struck his lung as well. I think that that at the end of the day, the physical evidence that we see demonstrated relative to the angle of deflection in these gunshot wounds really tells a story about what happens. We can dance around with all the verbiage that we want to in court and that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, this fellow was essentially executed.
Is there any other way to look at it? I mean, again, she's saying it was a heat of the moment, took the gun out, fired. But do those shots indicate random firing, or does that indicate more of an execution?
No, she was in very close proximity, I would estimate. Now, I'm not talking she's in contact distance, but again, he's in a very tight area. I mean, all of us can kind of envision, an internal stairwell in a house, kind of confined. He's down on a landing. She's superior to him. Apparently, they talk about the acute angle of the gunshot wound traveling down, striking him. It's really hard to interpret this any other way. At least it was for the forensic pathologist when he was giving his description on the stand.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's get more into the day of the shooting. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will get into that. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back. Okay, now, I've heard of a lot of different crime scenes before. Joseph, I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. You've seen a lot of different crime scenes. You've heard a lot of stories before. Does this match up to anything you've ever seen before where somebody apparently opens fire on another person because of a comment that they made, and the defense's hope is to say this wasn't murder?
Yeah. I've heard people try to rationalize things based upon a heat of a moment type of thing, when the blood is up, as they say, and sometimes these things can be initiated by a comment that drives an individual into a fit of rage. So yeah, I've heard this before.
But can it make sense here that this is the reason, based upon the gunshots, the trajectory, what we've seen? Does this story match up? Because the prosecution is saying, no, it really doesn't.
No, I think that when you begin to take this in the totality of all of the other evidence that they're presenting, the physical evidence in particular, his body, it just doesn't jive to me. It doesn't. So yeah, I think that I'm not buying her interpretation of the events. I'd much rather rely on the findings at the scene and plus those at the morgue as well. Yeah,
let's play some more of her testimony because we're getting into the real details of the shooting. Again, this is Claudia Hoerig, who took the stand yesterday. Okay, Joseph, that physical altercation, we're talking about something 11 years ago. Is there any way to confirm whether or not that's true?
No, she's saying that the only thing I could think of is when the police handled the scene, was there any indication that she had struck or that someone had pushed her into the wall? Was the drywall damaged? Was the framework damaged anyway? Was there any overturned furniture? One of the things we look for at a crime scene is we always look for forced entry and we always look for signs of struggle. And that applies not just to bodies, that applies to the physical structure itself, the totality of this home. So they would have gone over it with a fine-tooth comb. And trust me, they would have, Jesse. They've got a guy that's dead lying on the floor in a moderate or early stages of decomposition, and he has, in fact, been shot. So they're going to go over this thing very, very carefully. I want to know if they came across any evidence that anything had been overturned.
Even if it's true, we've seen self-defense cases where it doesn't even justify what she would have done. So this is, even if the jury believes this is not an easy hook for her. Let's take a break, though. No. And Joseph, I'm sorry, we have to, Joseph, we still have you for another half hour. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the discovery of these bodies. And joining me is Joseph Scott Morgan, forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, still with us. Joseph, bodies in the desert for 3 years, what does it do to them?
As the witness stated, did you hear what he said? He said that the bone that he saw, what caught his eye was the fact that it was very white. Yeah. As you can see in that top image on the left, that would be typical of what you would see. The bones literally become bleached after a period of time, and it's quite striking when you contrast it with kind of the desert soil. It stands out. Remember what he said. He thought that maybe it was a turtle shell or a tortoise shell, and it would be that striking. And I've seen bones in the desert before, and they do in fact stand out.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about the digging up of the bodies with Sergeant Armando Avila, a former homicide detective who took the stand as well. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Of that paper, it says north, correct?
Correct.
And on the right side of the paper, it has south.
Correct.
And you documented in your report the items that were excavated from grave B in order. Does that seem right when you're writing your report?
In order of the way that they were reported to me.
Correct. And do you have that report in front of you?
Yes.
And in your report, I believe you listed out 21 items or separate lines of things that were reported to you as being excavated, correct?
Correct.
And the first 5 items that were reported to you, you did not personally see, but you were informed of the details of the order they were found and the depth. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
At least the first 4. The 5th one, you were not giving a depth amount, correct?
But I did get the measurements, but I wasn't there for that.
Right. And if looking back at the exhibit I showed you, is it 748, I believe it is? On the back of that.
That's correct.
Would those items on that be the exact same orders they were on your list? Any foundation for an exhibit?
Sure, we'll get into.
I'm sorry, can you ask the question?
Maybe if I could point to you, so you can understand the question a little bit better. On exhibit 748, starting on the left side on the north end, since you're working north to south, each item is listed in the same order as your report.
That is correct.
And on the depth, if on the side with the north, you have lines of 6 inches, 12 inches, and 18 inches, representing the depth they were found. Does that sound accurate?
Yes.
And the same exact measurements on the south side, so it goes across.
Yes.
And so these would be in accurate order to your report, if you can review the entire exhibit in your report.
As we understand how the bodies were discovered and recovered, Joseph, I guess the question is, talking about the bodies being there for 3 years, is it surprising that you wouldn't find a whole lot of McStay's DNA at the gravesite?
No, this is a very, very harsh environment, Jesse. That goes without saying. So, yeah, it would, a lot of the stuff is so compromised that it would be very difficult. Not a lot of rain. They go through a monsoon season. Remember, the first witness had talked about these kind of rivulets that he's referring to. That's the wash patterns that you get as a result of water passing over. But, yeah, these bodies are not in a contained space like a coffin or something like that. They're in exposed soil. It's very harsh here. It's really going to wipe out most of the DNA that's there, anything that's usable.
In other words, just because we don't see a ton of evidence linking him at that gravesite doesn't mean he didn't do it.
No, absolutely not. It doesn't. It just means that you have to try all the more harder, press harder as an investigator to fit some of the pieces together. DNA is merely a tool, just like anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point. And really trying to understand what happened to this family of 4. And we're trying to answer those questions right now. We know his DNA was found on the McStay family vehicle. I'd like to touch upon that. I think we have to take a quick break, though, so maybe we'll talk about it on the upside of our break. But when we come back, there is a lot more to discuss. We expect to be live in that courtroom at around 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as soon as we have more updates, we'll make sure to let you know. We'll be right back. Okay, a witness testifying that he didn't have a great relationship with the defendant, and the defendant may have had a gambling problem, which again is a motive that helps for the prosecution, saying, hey, this guy was in financial distress, had a reason to kill Joseph McStay and his family. Joseph, I want to talk about the crime scene with you, though, because one of the lead detectives said, despite what appears to be blood spatter on a table, he believes that the killings did not occur in the house. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I reviewed this earlier, it's chilling. You think about if that's not the location where it took place, how would you go about getting the 4 people out of there in order to facilitate their deaths? And I think that's a big question. You know, you're seeing this image of this staining on this table that was taken in the initial kind of safety walkthrough that they've applied, that they've talked about earlier in court. There's no way to go back and kind of type that and find out what's going on with that at this point in time. that's something that both of these cases we're covering today have in common, isn't it, Jesse? So much time has elapsed in both of these cases. It makes it particularly an uphill battle, both in Herring and in this case. And it's left me scratching my head. How do you get 4 people out of the house and facilitate their deaths? And was, did the hammer actually play in to the death, or was the hammer a means to attempt to destroy the bodies, or did he just have a hammer laying around that he wanted to throw into a grave? I have no idea.
One of the weirdest aspects of this entire case is that the sledgehammer was not right next to it. I know we have about 20 seconds left. What do you think about the sledgehammer being right next to the bodies?
Well, to me, at least at first blush, as an investigator, I would think that there would be tie back with that hammer, either as a weapon to menace somebody with, or a weapon to destroy somebody with. We see a large depressed fracture on the backside of that skull that was just viewed. I think that that's significant. Now, the question becomes, was this done in life, or was this done post-mortem? And again, so much time has elapsed at this period.
Do you think, Joseph, I think we have now about 20 seconds or 30 seconds, do you think we're going to get a fuller answer of what ultimately happened to these 4 people?
Lord, I hope so. If for nobody else's peace of mind, hopefully their remaining family. I just don't know, Jesse. People are, it's like watching a dog chase its tail. It just seems like we never get anywhere with this. And trying to find out all these years later, very, very difficult.
Joseph Scott Morgan, thanks so much for coming on today to talk about both of the trials that we're covering today. We'll make sure to have you back.
You bet.
All right, everybody, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll discuss more of the McStay family murder trial. We'll be right back.